In this video, I'm gonna walk you through the best beginner business models to start in 2025. Let's go. I wanna walk you through essentially my tier list of best beginner businesses. And I do wanna put an emphasis on beginner businesses. And one thing that I kind of want to explain before I start this is the fact that I truly believe that all these business models can work, but not all of them are great for beginners. So let's start with dropshipping. I kind of have my gripe with dropshipping. The main reason behind that is I think it's very hard. The barrier of entry is very high. You have to learn so many different skill sets. You have to learn how to do product research, how to build a store, how to do marketing, specifically paid ads. And then you're testing with all these different products. And by the time you find a winning product, you're maybe a couple grand deep, and maybe that product kind of dies down after a while. So again, for me, it's not an ideal beginner business because A, you're investing your own money. B, it takes a lot of time to find a winning product. And on top of that, once you actually find a winning product, it might die down and then you have to transition into the next thing. So you're continuously chasing. So I'm going to give dropshipping an F. I personally don't like it. I think there's better ways for beginners to actually make money online, which I'll get into here shortly. So number 2 is SMMA. I started with SMMA and I continue to do SMMA with my agency. But I think for beginners, it's tricky because when you say SMMA, that's like a wide range of different things. So whenever you go into SMMA, you have to pick a niche, right? SMMA can mean content creation. It could mean paid advertising. It could mean editing. There's so many different things that you could do. It could be social media management. So number 1 is defining what you do, right? Number 2 is learning how to do that thing and being very experienced so that when it comes time to actually servicing your client, you're competent and you're not realizing all this client churn, consistent churn. And I think that's where a lot of people go wrong. They go into it, they start charging these clients different retainers, and 2 months in, the client realizes, holy shit, I hired someone that does not know what they're doing. So as a beginner, I think it is very difficult, but I will say it is one of the best business models for long-term success if and only if you're dedicated to refining your skill and eventually training your employees on that same skill so that you can have a successful business. As a beginner, I'm going to go ahead and put this at a B. I don't think it's terrible, but I don't necessarily think it's the best either. Next, we have IPGA. So IPGA stands for Info Product Growth Agency. So essentially what this means is that you partner with coaches and consultants that have some sort of digital product, take a percentage of their revenue and essentially help them build out different funnels, their marketing acquisition channel, potentially content, all these different factors that drive leads and growth to their business. And you end up taking a percentage of their revenue. In theory, this is a great model. I have nothing against it. I do have something against beginners going into this type of business. Why? Because being able to actually learn these different skills and have what it takes to run a successful agency that offers these types of skills like funnel building, email marketing, paid advertising, different channels of acquisition, potentially even content creation, scripting, production, all these different things. A beginner's going to hop in there and they're going to be like, holy shit, I have no idea how to execute on any of this. So again, in theory, IPGA is good, but for a beginner, I think it's absolute shit. So I'm just going to put that at E. I like the model, but I just don't think it's good for beginners. Next, we have Growth Partner. So Growth Partner is very similar to an IPGA, but in this case, it's more defined towards e-com stores. Again, I think this is a great model in theory, but for beginners, it's very tough. First, you're dealing with e-com store owners that are probably somewhat established, so they know a little bit about everything at least. They know how to run ads. They know a little bit about email marketing. They know a little bit of conversion rate optimization. They know a little bit about content. So you essentially have to be multiple steps ahead of these business owners that have been running their business at times for multiple years. And as a beginner, come in and take care of literally all of their marketing efforts. That's a tall ask, dude. To be great and to be exceptional at one thing alone is difficult. But to be exceptional at 5 different offerings and put them together into one, that one's tricky, really tricky. And I think it's not necessarily for beginners. Again, all of these models are great and they can work, but the topic here is beginner businesses. So I'm going to group that right next to IPGA. and I'm going to put growth partner at an E. Okay, next we have clippers. So clippers are essentially, the best way to describe this is Andrew Tate, this is how he got famous. He essentially gave his entire content library to people that were within his academy and said, hey, go out, clip content for me, and you get an affiliate revenue. Right now, what people are doing, specifically the most recent person to do this was Iman Godsi, but instead of essentially giving clippers an affiliate retainer, he just hired them in-house to distribute his content onto so many different profiles so that it gives the illusion of being bigger or greater than he actually was at the time, if that makes sense. So essentially a clipper's job is to repurpose existing content for short form mediums, right? And I think this is brilliant. It's a great model, but I see one big flaw with this. And that flaw is essentially the fact that you are trading your time for a set price. Unless you have like a very juicy affiliate model, I can see how this might be beneficial, but again, the amount of time it actually takes you to create these clips and potentially just trade it for a time and sell these clips at a retainer for whatever influencer out there, it's your inputs are not disproportional to your potential output or your potential gain. And that's the definition of leverage, is like, what can you do? What type of inputs can you put in to be able to have like some sort of disproportional output or gain? So I'm going to give clippers right where it should be at a C. I like it, but for a beginner, I just think your time can be better spent. Next, we have influencers, which is essentially every kid's dream this day. So what is an influencer? In my opinion, it's someone that consistently posts on social media, gains a following, and essentially makes a living either through platform revenue, which is essentially like AdSense on YouTube, or potentially brand deals. They don't necessarily have like some sort of business on the back end to monetize their audience based off of. And I see a big issue with this. Number one, the amount of time it takes you from point A to becoming a successful influencer, right? From start to finish. I think that could take years. It's an entire career. I understand how people idolize this, but relying on brand deals alone is very tricky. And I can tell you, like, coming from the agency side where I work with a lot of brands, a lot of these brands hate working with influencers. Number one, because they're absolute divas. And then on top of that, when they do pay them a thick chunk of money, their content never converts. So brands are falling more and more out of love with working with influencers, which is kind of putting them in a tricky situation where, in my opinion, they're actually going extinct. So for me, I'm going to go ahead and put influencer at D. I just don't think it's the way to go about it. It's getting trickier and trickier as time goes on, and I don't love it. I don't. I think it's just going to get more and more competitive. And on top of that, the route towards monetization is getting less and less likely. So influencer, well-deserved D. Finally, we have social sellers. Now, in my opinion, this is by far the best beginner business model. And even if you're not a beginner, it's incredibly tangible. Like, there are ways to monetize this long term, and I'll get into that here in a sec. But number one, it requires no upfront cash, right? So again, there's no real risk behind it. Number two, you're trading essentially a little bit of your time for a potential disproportionate output, which again, going back to the definition of leverage, you do one thing, you set an X amount of time to that, and your reward is potentially much, much greater than that. So that is a high leverage activity because you're leaning into these different algorithms on these different social platforms that could potentially make your post viral. On top of that, when it does go viral, you're making money based off of people purchasing the products without you spending a dime on those products because brands oftentimes are sending you free samples. Like, the risk reward ratio, I've never seen anything like this in my entire career in social media. And the beauty of it is that it's still in its infancy. It's just getting started. And if you observe China, for example, China's been big on social selling for the past like 5 to 10 years, and it's just getting started. They're making trillions a year. And now our part of the world is barely getting acclimated to it and understanding the power of social selling. It's literally a baby right now. And by the time you hop on, and if you take this seriously, you could turn this into a potentially full-time career. So in my opinion, based off of all those different factors that I just discussed, I give social seller an S. I literally don't see a downside to social selling. it's quite straightforward, in my opinion, the best opportunity that I've ever seen potentially in my lifetime, which is crazy to say. By the way, if you're interested in becoming a social seller, I put together a free training for you that you can find by clicking the link down below.